Welcome to Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you so much for joining us. Today we'll be speaking with some educators. We're going to start with the Superintendent of Burbank Unified, then we'll be speaking with the Board President of West Covina Unified, and we'll continue on our program with another person that's heading up an education program. She's doing great work from Scripps College. But first, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Jan Britz. She is the Superintendent of Burbank Unified. Congratulations on your new position.
Thank you, Brad.
It's about
I appreciate that.
A year in?
Yes, I'm starting my second half of my first year.
Well, that's terrific, and it must feel so good that the funding crises at some level are behind us.
Well, we are encouraged
Right.
with the funding, but it doesn't give us a true sigh of relief.
So let's talk about funding, because I think
Okay.
it's very important that our viewers, that the voters of California understand what Prop 30 did and did not do.
Okay, great.
For Burbank, as a metaphor, what did it do and not do?
Well, for Burbank and for all school districts, it really stopped, taking funds away from education. So it stopped that funding but it did not give us any increased funding.
And that's the key.
Yes.
Is that it prevented budget cuts, but that's all. There's no new money per se as a result of Prop 30.
Very accurate.
What's interesting, though, is, and I'm shocked to say this, but apparently California is in the black in terms of its budget. And so the governor is looking to pay back some of the money that the state borrowed from school districts. We know possibly up to $2 billion
Correct.
for all school districts. There are
Correct.
thousands in this state. So what will that mean for school districts if money's going to be paid back that was borrowed?
Well, the money that was borrowed actually came from our revenue limit and Proposition 98.
Of course.
The money that's coming into our schools this year, according to the governor, is actually a COLA at 1.65%.
Cost of living increase.
Correct. And so we are really not being made whole. And that's one of the things that the superintendents throughout the state of California has really pushed the governor to do, is to look at our districts with his budget plan, and as the funds come in, to make us whole before we look at the local control funding formula that he's implementing.
Let's talk about local control. There are 2 points that I want to get to. The first is the governor is looking to create more local control vis-a-vis a formula that would give more money to school districts that have disadvantaged children.
Correct.
What do you make of that?
I do think that for the schools that have a very high population of economically disadvantaged students, they have needs, and it's a multitude of needs because of the number of students that qualify under that identification. And that does cost more to do the interventions, to bring them up to grade level, to master the standards that we're teaching. However, a district like Burbank also have needs.
Right.
Because of the funding cuts, in the last 3 years, our budgets have been cut about 20%. When 85% of your budget is salaries and benefits, what ends up happening is we cut to the bare bones. And for those students that are falling through the cracks, we can't get them and bring them back up to grade level.
And just because they happen to live in an area with fewer Title I students than the neighbors next door, they're not going to see that extra push of infusion of capital.
Correct.
I do want to talk about local control in the context of bonding.
Okay.
As we know, Californians can tax themselves through local bond measures. And as we know, Californians can do that through a 55% vote now if it's a school bond. And so you are turning to your voters in Burbank Unified on March 5th.
Correct.
With Measure S.
Yes.
Tell us about Measure S.
Well, I'm very excited to talk about this, and I'm glad you brought up Proposition 30, because as we talk about no new funding into the district through Prop 30, one of the things that we have is we have schools that are very old. We have
Literally.
I
mean, from the 1940s.
We have 7 schools that are from the 1920s.
Wow.
9 schools that are from the 1940s, and 3 schools in the 1950s, and those are our total schools.
And it's essentially when Burbank grew up, when Disney came in, Warner Brothers
Correct.
came in, that's when all these schools were built with the whole boom of the San Fernando Valley, and nothing since.
That's correct, Brad.
And so talk to us about what you are asking your voters to do on March 5th.
Well, with our bond called Measure S for school bond, what we are doing is we're actually going for a $110 billion bond.
Billion.
Yes. A million.
Million.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Billion would be nice.
Thank you. Very conservative.
Right.
Okay. And what that means to our community folks is that's $5 additional taxes for every $100,000 that is assessed value on their home. So if my home, if I bought it for $400,000, we're talking that my taxes will go up $20
A year.
a year. That's like a lunch.
It
Okay,
is.
we can all give up a lunch.
Well,
The average home in Burbank is about $350,000.
Okay.
Okay, so we're being very conservative. They pay $50 now for a bond that was passed in 1997, a facilities bond. This is a facilities bond. That would be $5 to, and when it.
And what happened with that bond? Has it run out?
That has run out.
I see.
We've done all the modernization that we said we were going to do. The money was spent wisely. And for this bond, we're talking about facility needs that are deeper. Things such as roofing and plumbing and air conditioning. And then the other thing that we're looking at that is critical, and we can all really relate to this, is for safety and security of our children.
Well, I mean, that's a topic everyone is discussing in light of the travesty, the tragedy in Newton, Connecticut.
Exactly.
I presume that the bond was written before that tragedy, but are there funds dedicated to school safety?
There are.
Well, that's fortunate,
And-
fortuitous.
Yes, it is. And, you know, of course, the tragedy that happened at Sandy Hook Elementary School has made us even more aware of how much these needs are that we have to implement them. So we're looking at that. And then the other thing that we're looking at, too, is technology. And if I could just take a minute and share
Please.
with you and just paint a little picture. You know, it used to be when us as adults went to school, we used to love to do reports because the encyclopedias and
World
resource
book.
materials.
I just found my old world books.
Exactly.
I'm telling you, I
they
didn't know what
just
to
were
do.
so.
I love
We would
them.
love to pick them up and go through them, and we couldn't afford
used to
those in our
read.
home.
I used to read. world books.
Everyone.
What's wrong with me?
We couldn't afford those in our homes.
Right.
Then in 1990s came about in the schools a digital high school grant, and we were able to put computers in the schools. And at this time too, the schools had better resources than we had at home. This is the first time that I can really remember that our children are coming to school with better educational resources than we have at school.
I just bought my daughter an iPad mini.
There you
Was
go.
that a wise thing to do, Dr. Britz?
It
I mean,
is.
I feel very conflicted about whether I did the right thing. She's
Well,
11.
Well, you know, Brad, we have a different generation of
Right.
students, and this is really called Generation M, the
M.
multimedia taskers.
But what about they're sitting there texting all day? I'll
They
give her an
are.
iPad mini. I don't want to give her a phone because I don't want her to sit there and text.
Well, and we can do that because one of the things with the new technology now is we have interactive learning devices. We give students, we could give students clickers that are like their phones, where when a teacher is presenting a lesson, they're asking a question, you do it, and on my board,
I'll know how many got it right,
shows the
right.
kids too, how many got it right, how many
So
didn't.
will the bond be used in some part for technology improvements?
Absolutely. It'll be used for interactive devices. It'll be used for infrastructure throughout the district.
So let's say the bond passes. How
Correct.
quickly can we see these new interactive devices?
Well, we're piloting some now in
you are?
8 classrooms, and we have done some open invitations to community and to district folks to come in and see what they're all
I
about.
do want to quickly ask you, I had a conversation with Bill Lockyer, the treasurer of the state of California, and he has expressed some serious concern about a bonding mechanism used by some school districts called capital appreciation bonds. Are you familiar with
I
those
am.
bonds? The interest rates are astronomical.
That's
I
correct.
would presume that Measure S, does it turn to capital appreciation bonds?
We have a hybrid approach, and one of the things that we call them CAB bonds. And with those bonds, those are mostly used in districts throughout the state that are growth districts.
I
They're
see.
bringing in a lot of enrollment. Their homes coming in are at a more reasonable rate, and then they're going up. They're to a more reasonable value for that
Right.
community as it grows. And Burbank, we're a very stable community. Well, our bond is a converter bond, and it's a hybrid approach, and it is very conservative. And when I explained to you about how much it would go up as far as our assessed value, that's what we're saying, a very conservative bond. In addition to that, we're also able that if the interest rates go down,
You
that
can take advantage.
we can take advantage.
Her name is Dr. Jan Britz. She is the superintendent of Burbank Unified. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Eileen Miranda Jimenez. She is the president of the West Covina School Board. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition. Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest now, Eileen Miranda Jimenez. She is a member of the West Covina School Board. We thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to speak with you about public education.
Okay.
As we know, in November, the voters passed a tax initiative,
Yes.
Proposition 30. A significant portion of that money is dedicated to public schools K-12. How is that playing out in your district in West Covina?
Well, it was very good that it passed. We desperately needed the funds. Had Prop 30 not passed, we would have had to make $9 million in cuts just in West Covina Unified.
And is that a significant number?
That is a significant number considering our budget was $75 million.
So that was over 10%.
Correct.
So were you surprised that the voters were as generous as they were in the final analysis? Because we saw the same polls and it didn't appear that Prop 30 was headed for passage.
Correct, and especially because it had the competition from the Molly Munger bill.
Right, which caused some confusion.
Right, so no one knew if the governors would pass or Molly Munger's would pass. I think at the end of the day, when school started and parents were back in school and they understood what was at stake with their children and the education, and by the way, it was K-14.
Right, of course,
So
community
I
colleges
think
as well.
community colleges also made a strong push.
Right.
Also, so I think that at the end of the day, the voters made the right choice.
And higher ed's going to get more money. We know.
Correct.
I do want to ask you about the governor's proposed budget for 2013-14. We know that more money is dedicated to K-12, but he is also looking at changing the funding formula, whereby school districts that serve children that may be economically disadvantaged will see a bigger slice of the pie. What do you think about that proposal?
My initial, I would have to say that I prefer that the money follow the student, and I think that having the designation be equal is very key. Because what happens is when schools, and this is what we complain about often, is that when schools are doing well and they're no longer considered a disadvantaged
Right.
school, the funding gets taken. So then what does the school do?
It is interesting. Where's the incentive?
Right. Exactly, and we see it time and time happen with Title I. So if the governor can keep the money in play for the school districts, then I would say it sounds like a great idea. But if the money is going to be pulled when the school now becomes a high achieving school, then we're going to have a problem, and you're pulling
It's a
the
reverse
rug out
incentive.
from the school.
As part of this proposal, though, he is looking to decrease the amount of strings that Sacramento attaches to school districts for funding, give more local control. What do you think about that?
I like that.
I'm sure you
I
do.
do,
Right.
yes, because the local control, we know what we need, and to keep the money locally and the less hands that are placed in the pie, even better. So I would agree with that. And I just wanted to also say
please. No.
that with Prop 30, the public also, I think they were a little misinformed in that it did provide existing funding for us.
I know what you're saying.
We were going to have to cut $9 million. We still are cutting $2 million.
Oh, really?
Because it wasn't new money.
Well, yeah, the metaphor I use is it stopped the bleeding.
Yes,
It's not
thank
a
you.
new infusion of
Right.
blood.
No.
It just prevents more cuts that would come but
Right.
for the Prop 30 passage.
Correct, and I think that communities don't understand that, and we need to make a better effort at letting parents know that, because people think, well, we gave you the money, so why are you making cuts? Why is my child not
it's
getting
not new
after school services, and they don't understand that Prop 30 wasn't the be all and end all, like you said, it wasn't new money.
Although we do know that California owes the school districts billions of dollars,
Yes.
literally, because
Prop
that money
98.
was used to help balance the budget in
Yes.
deficit times.
Right.
The governor is looking, as part of this budget, to return almost $2 billion to school districts. I don't have a sense, maybe you do. What will happen with that money that was owed? Do you know? Because
Well, probably, again, if you create a local control and
Right.
school districts get to decide what's best for them, you might find some school districts returning back to 20-1. You might find other school districts getting tutors back in.
I have to tell you, that 20-1 was so incredibly popular. I remember it was the law, K through 3,
Yes.
20-1 was mandated.
Yes.
And now, I mean, how is it in West
Well, it
Covina?
wasn't necessarily mandated. There were economic incentives.
Oh, I see.
It was
Okay.
economic incentives. So if your district went K3 20-1, then you got extra money. So it was an incentive to keep the schools at a lower number. K3, the program, they eased up some of their restrictions, and allowed some of the the schools have districts
Right.
have gone 22, 24, and then some of them are not even getting that additional money.
I want to ask you about what we know as API reform.
Okay.
As you know, California, for better or for worse, likes to see how its students are doing on a regular basis.
Correct.
And there is a good amount of standardized testing going on. But there is some significant reform of how schools' academic performance index would be measured back in September. It really, in a lot of ways, is revolutionary. It limits test scores weight to 60%. That's a huge change. What do you think about the way that California is now approaching standardized testing and how much weight it gives?
You know, the good thing about what California has done, and when I've met with colleagues nationally, and I've talked to people from Mississippi and Alabama and Iowa and Montana, we were really at the forefront of creating a standardized test. Unfortunately, a standardized test isn't a be-all or end-all,
Right.
but at least it gave us a measure, and it pushed all of our schools to achieve. So now we're moving in the direction of Common Core, which is much better.
Well, that's
Yes.
another big change. Why don't you explain
Yes.
what Common Core means?
Okay, so Common Core is where now we are looking at not just math and reading and writing as what we're going to be measuring on API, but we're also looking at science and languages. We're also making sure technology is a big component of what's going on in the classroom through Common Core. And then there's a lot of international focus and group work. So
and that goes into being in 2014, is that
correct.
right?
And then they're going to start testing shortly thereafter. Now, the difficulty we're having as school districts is we don't know what our students are going to be tested on.
Ooh,
so you have a lot of school districts that are changing now and putting an emphasis on Common Core, but we don't yet know what that instrument is going to be that we're going to be evaluating.
Now, here's what's interesting, though. Yes, we've engaged in this API reform, this standardized testing reform, but over the last few years, as education budgets were plummeting, standardized test scores were soaring. I mean, that's kind of the irony. I mean, in LAUSD, for example, I know you're in a different district, but the English STAR testing went up 18 points in 6 years. The Math STAR testing scores went up 14 points. So, I don't know, I see an incongruity there. Do you?
No, I think it's part of a trajectory. I think education, again, remember, California's been at the forefront of standardized testing. When we pulled API, and here's a really good example. When President Bush brought in No Child Left Behind, and he
very controversial.
Right, very controversial because it was an unfunded mandate.
Right.
Because we considered I apologize, the word is escaping me, but what we considered at grade or
Right.
acceptable was actually higher than what and No Child Left Behind was.
Oh.
So we were actually hurting ourselves because we were calling it a certain word and they were using the same word and we were like this.
Right, you were upside down.
So we were on the trajectory to do well. With the budget cuts, I'm not going to say that it focused, but again, everyone we as school districts had to take that look of, okay, what is the most important? But we were going, I think with or without that money, we were headed in that direction to achieve.
So what about President Obama's incentivized funding formulas? They are controversial as well for different reasons.
Correct, race to the top.
Right.
This last round, and it absolutely just broke my heart, we were looking at an infusion of anywhere from $10 to $25 million potentially under
Right.
Race to the Top. But because they needed a sign off from the unions to say that they were going to partner with us to look at teacher evaluations.
Didn't happen. Right.
And so we had already from our own union in our district had received agreement to start creating a teacher evaluation component.
But it's a statewide evaluation. It's not district by district as I understand it.
And so it failed, and that was a very heartbreaking day to turn our back on 10 to 25 million.
Her name is Eileen Miranda Jimenez. She is the president of the West Covina School Board. We thank you so much for joining us on Charter California Edition.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're still with us. Our guest is Kelli Hewitt. She is the director of the Scripps College Academy. It is a program that is doing such great work for young women in the Los Angeles, Southern California area. I am so glad you're here. Before we talk about the Academy, I want to hear about your journey to this position as director. Talk to us.
Sure. Well, I'm very happy to be here and
Please.
speak about our program. I had the opportunity to get involved with the Scripps College Academy while I was an undergraduate at Scripps. So the majority of our program staff comes from our undergraduate students.
Right.
I got to, as a first year in college, get to mentor high school girls who knew they wanted to go to college but didn't know quite how to get there.
And of course, Scripps College, part of the Claremont Colleges, the consortium. Scripps College happens to be single sex and about 900 students. We recently had your president on. I was completely taken by her. And what's interesting about your program, and we'll get into it in a moment, is it's not necessarily a feeder to Scripps College exclusively.
Exactly. So our goal as a leader in women's education is to look just beyond just the college years and say, what can we do to help young women in our local communities prepare for the college of their choice?
Their choice, which is key. Okay, so tell me more about the Scripps College Academy. And as you're listening, know that they are accepting applications right now for young women in 9th and 10th grade. And the deadline for that application is March 16th, so we have a few weeks. We're in great shape.
Yeah.
Tell us about the program.
Perfect. So right now we're accepting applications specifically for our SCA Scholars Program. This is our flagship program, our most intensive. And students join in the 9th or 10th grade, like you said. They get to start by attending a 2-week summer residential program on our campus.
Residential. Does that
Residential.
mean it's essentially education summer camp for 2 weeks?
Exactly. They get to live in the dorms,
wow.
eat in the dining hall, and take classes from our faculty members. Almost 40% of the faculty at Scripps have taught in this program, so they really get to experience what it's like to have, you know, the instruction, the feedback, and the attention of really top faculty members.
So how many students do you anticipate to accept for this 2013 class?
For the 2013 class, we're able to bring in about 50 students, and we will stick with them all throughout high school. So following the summer program, when they're in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, they'll be invited back to our campus for monthly activities, book clubs, science research opportunities, field trips. We'll do test preparation, and then in the senior year, we'll walk them every step of the way through the college application and financial aid process.
So who's your perfect candidate?
Well, every one of our candidates, of course, is special, but we're really seeking to serve first-generation students, so students who are highly motivated, applying themselves in school, but maybe have tapped out the resources available immediately to them.
So my father was a first-generation college student, and he was admitted to 2 colleges, Columbia University, a part of the Ivy League, and Brooklyn College of Pharmacy. And he went to Brooklyn College of Pharmacy because that's where his cousin went. So that is an example of kind of tapped out of resources. There just wasn't a sense of, again, Brooklyn College of Pharmacy, I'm sure is wonderful.
Yes.
But this is where just having an outsider guide these young women can be so critical.
And we know if we're able to get them to start at a very strong 4-year college, their potential to graduate in 4 years and have immediate employment and really good impact on the community is going to be so much more likely.
So what about the geography? Because look, I'm sure that someone can get from wherever they may be in Southern California for 2 weeks, they stay there and then get home, but the program is continuing, and so they need to get out to Claremont.
Yeah.
I understand you've taken that into consideration.
Yeah, very good question. We have thought about transportation. We know that transportation is potentially a barrier for some students and families to accessing good resources like ours. So we do commit to providing transportation through things like subsidized Metrolink tickets and rides from various locations. And anyone who's interested in knowing if we serve specifically their region or their neighborhood are welcome to contact us.
Generally, what are the regions?
Generally, the regions we're serving a lot of students who live near downtown, a lot of students who are living in South LA, and then a lot of communities near our campus. Upland, Ontario, Montclair, they're near our campus in Claremont, but it's surprising how close they can be. And yet, how limited, how so far, exactly.
I want to talk to you about that kind of first generation student, because I think about my father's experience. You know, his parents were immigrants. I don't even think they finished high school in Eastern Europe. We have similar situations here where they may be immigrants from Asia, immigrants from Central and South America, and there's just no tableau. I mean, it's not that they don't want their kids to achieve, but it's often, it's good enough. Your cousin went to Brooklyn College of Pharmacy. How are you able to speak with that parent?
Yeah.
Because again, I'm sure they're loving and supportive and want to do everything they can, but you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly, and we really respect the families and know that they are working so hard to give many opportunities to their students. Our goal is just to give them the information and the support to make their dreams happen. So I think of
But you don't even know what your dream is
I know.
half the time. That's the challenge. I keep going back to my father, who, I mean, literally had no idea what he was facing.
Yeah.
And, this is 50 years ago, obviously, but the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah. So when we bring students onto our campus, it's almost always the first time on a college campus for them.
Sure.
And it's the same for their families. So for a lot of families, the process of their student getting to live on a college campus, getting to meet with faculty members, is mirrored in that they get to experience what it's like for them.
Families, I assume the families are not there for the 2 weeks.
Exactly.
But they participate a bit in that 2-week process?
Yes, and just having the students slightly away from home
Right, just
for
slightly.
2 weeks, it is as much a learning experience for the students as it is for their families, and they often experience, we can do this
What
together.
about language barriers with parents? Are you able to work through that?
Yeah.
Should it present?
Yeah, so we make sure the most common language that our students are speaking in the home would be Spanish. And so we commit to all of our staff in our office being very comfortable communicating in English and Spanish. But we have plenty of families who prefer other languages, whether it be Vietnamese
Right.
or Mandarin or another language. And fortunately, because we're on a college campus, we
Someone
have
speaks that
access-
language.
Yes.
Whatever language it may be, someone's speaking it.
And we know that if there's a father concerned about his daughter
safety.
going away,
Sure.
we need a father who can speak to that father and really find that best fit.
So the Academy is 10 years old, and I think it's fair to say you've had some successes.
Yeah,
Don't you think?
we have.
few.
We're very happy.
Why don't you tell us about some of your successes?
So 2 years ago, we won the National Arts and Humanities Youth Program Award, which is a long title, but it's an award from the White House. So we are
The
very
White House.
happy to be able to send one of our students to receive it from Michelle Obama.
That's nice.
And the other way we think about our successes, of course, is our students. So we've been able to send students to more than 65 colleges all throughout the country. About half of our students begin at a private, about half begin at a public, but they're all going to the college of their choice.
And you can work through financial aid challenges.
Definitely. And we know that financial aid is a really important piece. Of
course.
And that's one of the reasons we really promote private colleges like Scripps
It
College.
is ironic. They have better financial aid packages. They're the most expensive, but yet they can provide more resources.
When I say to students, if you see a high sticker price,
yeah.
think of it as potentially money for you.
Right.
Because that sometimes is an indicator that they have the resources to support the student who needs it the most.
So out of your 2012 graduating class, those high school students, what percent went to college?
100%.
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
So something's working.
The majority of them, 95%, went straight to a four-year college or university. Vast majority.
Not 51%.
No.
95%.
47% started at a highly selective or very selective college. And that's important to us not because of prestige or name recognition.
Well, why not?
But
Well, why
because-
not? That's important to me. Why not?
Because we know that those students have the resources and have the support there to make sure they're going to succeed.
You know, it's interesting. I've seen some documentaries about students who've kind of been plucked out of difficult neighborhoods. They get sent to these prestigious universities, and they just don't have the skills to adapt.
Yes.
Not the intelligence, the skills to adapt.
Yes.
But it seems like you are providing those adaptive skills for 3-4 years.
Yeah, that's a great point. We talk about social capital, that there's
Right.
things other than academic skills
Right.
that lead to success in college. And so, for example, when our 9th grade student gets to work in a classroom with a college faculty member,
They're on their way.
they're going to be so much better prepared
They're
for
on
that
their
first
way.
week of college.
I'm completely taken by you, as I have been with most people who come on my program from Scripps College. Her name is Kelli Hewitt. She is the director of the Scripps College Academy. The deadline is March 16th. I'm Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.